Welcome to Grosse Pointe Congregational Church for our Sunday worship. We're glad to have you with us. Enjoy our sermon this morning. Following the message, you'll find a link to give to our church, as well as a web link so you can visit our church website for upcoming future church events. Many of our events are done over Zoom. We hope that you'll be able to attend any or all of our scheduled activities. God's blessings be with you. Enjoy our message from Sunday morning.
Palinopsia is formed by the Greek word palin for again and opsia for seeing, and is a term to define the reoccurrence of a visual image after the initial stimulus has been removed. A popular type of palinopsia is known as physiological afterimage, which is the ability to create an optical illusion of an object after staring at a fixed object so that the object remains seen, or a new image is created after the key object is removed. Printed on the cover of your bulletins and now appearing on our liturgical screens is one of the popular images that's used by publications to introduce this topic. Though the image appears to be a mere blob, if you notice in the center of the image are 4 dots, somewhat between those 2 hearts. And this morning, we're going to witness this in action. You can either use the screens or the image in your bulletin, whichever is easiest for you. And for 30 seconds, just focus on the 4 dots. Don't look away, just focus on the 4 dots. If you have to blink, do so, but it works best if you don't have to, as you stare at those 4 little tiny dots. So here we go, 30 seconds. Okay, Walker, if you'll turn to the next screen, you may have to blink a few times. And if you're looking at your bulletin, just flip it over to a blank spot and just carefully blink a few times. You should see something. Maybe? No? How many are you seeing something? You may have to try it a few times later. So, kind of sweet, eh? This after image relied on our ability to remain focused on those tiny 4 dots and not being distracted by any surrounding visual data. This after image was created by the visual cortex, which instructed the cones and rods in your eyes to keep receiving data, thousands and thousands of pixels and information, which our brains are then using to process the incoming data so it can piece together our concept of reality. Of course, your brain is also saying, now, wait a minute, I'm staring at something white. That's the information I'm getting, but I'm still putting something together for you. And it's in that disconnection that some people struggle to see the after image, because to the brain, this after image isn't logical. Turning to the gospel reading, when Jesus rose to read the scripture in his home synagogue, the people gathered that day saw a lot more than they expected, and their brains attempted to process the reality of life as they saw it and what they were seeing before them. The people were amazed that Jesus, the son of Joseph, seemed to have as much knowledge of the scriptures as the rabbis and scribes in Jerusalem. Yet he was the boy who had lived down the street from them. It was amazing, but illogical. He didn't have a wealthy family, so he couldn't attend an Ivy League school. He hadn't even been gone long enough to gain such wisdom. They were attempting to connect the dots. And as impressive as Jesus was, they could not bring themselves to see the true image that was standing in front of them that day, that Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of God. Thankfully, other persons, like the disciples and the Apostle Paul, recognized that Jesus was the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. However, it's important to note that Paul didn't always see what was right in front of him. or at least he may have seen it, but his brain couldn't process the data. His optical nerves were data streaming. Paul initially denied that Jesus was the one through whom God lived and loved the world. That is, until Paul was blinded by Jesus' booming voice. And once Paul's eyes healed, he was able to witness the after image of Jesus, which appeared as Jesus' disciples and followers in their incredible works of healing and providing extraordinary love and care for others. It was at that moment Paul's brain was able to process the information that Jesus was the creator, redeemer, and sustainer of all things. Jesus was the one who helps us to find hope, even in situations that might seem impossible. Recognizing the after image of Jesus, which appears in creation, Paul realized that Jesus has been at the center of creation since the beginning. It was for this reason that no matter where a person goes on earth or in the galaxy or even beyond the stars, God is there, because from Paul's view, Christ was already there. Paul declares, he himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Paul believed we could see Christ in all things, in nature and in every human being. As such, we need to embrace strangers and neighbors. We need to support and care for each other and see the image of Jesus appear in the face of the stranger. And likewise, the stranger will be able to see the after image of Christ, which appears because of us. Paul has believed our ability to see the after image of Christ means that when we experience situations where we feel hopeless, wonderfully, Christ is there. In times of suffering, whether it's physical suffering, mental suffering, or just the suffering we are experiencing by being isolated from each other due to COVID, wonderfully, Christ is there. Similar to Paul's claim, the Gospel of John tells us that all things came into being through Jesus, and without him, not one thing came into being. The light of Christ shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Based on this gospel text, the universe is viewed as fundamentally good, and the goal of the Gospels is to guide persons toward cooperation as we witness the after image of the divine, which is imprinted on every person, no matter what gender, race, or faith and life journey. We are all held together through Christ, and we are all redeemed. For Paul, he recognized that the Colossian church had suffered persecution and injustice by their neighbors. In his letter, he addressed concerns that members in the congregation held, believing they were being punished for not being devout enough. Paul assured them that they were not being alienated by God, and in fact, he declared, you are in a right relationship with God. Paul doesn't attempt to dismiss their suffering nor define it exactly, but rather he is focused on the congregation's ability to stand united, even in the face of suffering caused by outside forces. He commends their unwavering loyalty to Christ as they share their resources with each other. He commends their ability to be Christ to each other, allowing the community to see the after image of Jesus to appear as they kept taking care of the widows and orphans in their midst. And even though the community threatened their lives, the congregation remained committed to their call to provide care for their neighbors. So the community at large, beyond the church, had food, medical care, and resources. Ironically, even at the heel of evil actions, they built sustainable neighborhoods and a viable community of faith. He commends them for their steadfast faith, which has built a viable community of faith, and Paul reminds them that he's aware of the challenges they have faced as he himself has faced them as well. He recalls the toils he has endured as he was beaten and rejected by communities who were unable to process the data their optical nerves saw in front of them. And he had experienced rejection by congregations who are unable to see the after image of Christ displayed by Paul. Yet even enduring painful rejections, Paul remained committed to Christ, recognizing that in all of these challenges, Jesus is the one who supports and sustains him. Like Paul, we are assured that Jesus remains with us, working for good in our lives, and he remains visible for us like an after image. Through those who serve as his feet and hands as they serve and care for others beyond themselves. For Paul, this after image is visible for those inside and outside the church, as this after image of Jesus can appear even in the most unexpected places. In a story told by Lewis Smedes, the author of A Pretty Good Person, he says he found Jesus in a very surprising location. Lewis says he had gone to the Los Angeles County Jail to bail someone out, and he had to wait in a waiting room for the slow wheels of justice to turn for the mammoth prison. Eventually, as he watched and waited as persons entered and exited from the prison gates, he was informed the guards were taking a lunch break and there would be no one there released for the next hour. So perhaps he should just go get lunch. So Lewis says he stepped outside to get some lunch when a gentleman walked out of the lobby at the same time. The man was wearing a black suit with a priest's collar, and Lewis assumed he must be the prison chaplain, so he invited the man to join him for lunch. Sitting in the restaurant, it turned out the man was not a chaplain, but an insurance salesman. And he had devoted 1 day per week to bring a moment of grace to those locked inside the county jail. He wore the priest's collar because he didn't want to surprise anyone when he shared the gospel of Jesus with them. But Lewis was surprised, not by the man's profession, but rather by his willingness to enter a prison with, quote, lowlifes, repeaters, and losers. The man replied, well, every person locked up in that jail has somebody with a key to let them out. But I meet people in my business every day who are locked up in a cell inside their hearts, and nobody on earth has a key to let them out. So I don't see an enormous difference between them and the folks inside the jail you refer to as hardcore losers. Well, maybe they are, but that's just not the way I divide people up, he says. The only two categories of people I really care about are the forgiven people and the unforgiven people. And at that moment, Lewis says, I met Jesus today. Lewis saw the after image of Christ sitting across from him, and he was reminded of the following, that we must remain willing to see the unexpected Jesus in each other, that we must keep our eyes from darting from one flashing image to the next, but remain focused on the ones God has in front of us. That we must keep our eyes open and allow our hearts to be stirred when we see where we can love others and provide care. That we must be willing to see the after image of Christ in each other, and we must be willing to allow others to see the after image of Christ in us and through our love and care. It may be difficult for persons to grasp what they are seeing, as the congregation in Nazareth saw Jesus standing right in front of them. Yet, even though they dismissed Jesus and attempted to run him off a cliff, the Gospels inform us that Jesus continued to love them as he walked through their midst. It is based on this model from Jesus that we embody him when we keep giving love away unconditionally. Thinking about this love given outward to others, medical doctor and author Gerald Jamatsky wrote, love is letting go of fear. And he writes that in his experience, we give ourselves freedom from fear when we accept everyone without making judgments. Adding, everything we think, say, or do reacts on us like a boomerang. When we send out judgments in the form of criticism, fury, or other attacking thoughts, they come back to us. When we send out only love, that comes back to us. Likewise, when we intentionally reflect the image of Christ, doing so, persons see the after image which remains long after we've left. And that love which we send out encircles people so that the body of Christ is brought into focus for the world. We do this through acts of love, which serves Jesus' purpose. And the picture of Christ is revealed through our love as it grows a little clearer and a little sharper every day. Encouraged by Paul to joyfully share the love of Christ, when you encounter neighbors, strangers, and friends, we're encouraged to ask ourselves, is it Jesus' after image I am producing? And what after image will people see after I leave?